In recent years, we've seen a world that has become somehow more or less isolated in some senses, where more parts of the world are more for their nation or their nationalism than was in the past years where there was more cosmopolitan and globalization. Now, albeit that globalization is not slowing down, these other issues, these other pockets of issues are growing in examples of our previous politics that are continue to divide our country. We've seen right-wing radicalism grow in parts of Greece in the early 2000s, as well as currently in parts of East Germany and parts of Japan. And so what you're noticing is these pockets having an influence in how decisions are being made, and ultimately affecting our response, for example, when it came to things like the pandemic, where nations couldn't really respond coordinatedly in a coordinated effort as much as we had hoped. For a good example, Europe couldn't really roll out COVID vaccines in a fair manner. And others started buying secretly, and others started buying others, and then others buying others out. It was a mess, and explaining why they're one of the slowest to roll out vaccines compared to the United States. But outside these issues, I hope and dream that the world will continue to globalize and become more homogenous in certain factors, but also that the good things that come from globalization and economic growth and economic unions will lift more people out of poverty and help more parts of society than not. Because the responses that we need for today's problems and the tomorrow's problems will need to be somehow global in nature. And so where does this all kind of started? And one of the best examples will come from Europe. In our first segment here, we'll talk about Europe. You'll see that countries that want to have multinational market regions tend to seek the mutual economic benefit. They want to reduce inter-regional trade barriers because we want to reduce costs, make trade freer and cheaper, so goods are cheaper and more accessible to all parts of society, as well as a free trade having particular geopolitical effects of better alliances and more friendly atmosphere. We see today that given all the things going on, that violence is still much lower than it was 50, 60 years ago. That's phenomenal. And we'll continue to see that trend go forward should things not be that disrupted. An economic union, though, is a little bit different, requiring favorable economic and political, cultural, and geographic factors. I say cultural with very carefully, but yes, nations, when they're deciding to go for an economic union, something that's more than just some trade activity, they're giving up sovereignty much more than, say, just trying to have a mutual agreement on goods and services. And that's where the European Union becomes this beacon of what was possible until these great new disruptions that we see today with Brexit and the disorganization of the union itself. But you have to give up sovereignty as a nation, and that's a key factor, hopefully for better, not worse. Other factors is that unions share development and market opportunities. The idea of what they want for growth becomes similar. And that's why you see competition laws or market competition laws in Europe are different than it was 30 years ago because of the union. Unfortunately, economic rules, competition rules in the United States are still some of the stiffest compared to the European Union. These have made some great strides in ensuring a fair market and a level market across different member states. Also, they can settle disputes better. We have different treaties in the European Union, such as the Rome Convention and the Brussels Convention, as well as the Maastricht Treaty. All these different things help level the understanding of what the rules of the road are and how to solve those in the jurisdictions decided, or whether these are contractual agreements and how those are decided. Amazing treaties and a great accomplishment for different nations with different legal systems. Political factors being still one of the strongest and more challenging issues to the European Union and other growth factors for your economic unions is that we share generally in the formation of a union like the European Union, they share political initiatives along the same lines, such as how do we manage people going across borders? How do we manage immigration? How do we manage climate change? How do we trade with our outside partners? How do we also make decisions within our country, such as saying protecting our market and protecting those within it? So those decisions become more uniform, such as product liability directives that give an idea of what the rules should be. Another important factor coming together is geographic proximity. You generally want things in similar zones, so trade is much more lucid, but that's not the most important factor. This one I'm a little careful with because it is an uneasy topic to talk about. Cultural factors. What are we saying is cultural factors? Are we saying that cultural factors at the surface because one's white and blonde, or one's dark-skinned and not? Is that a reason not to communicate or come together? And that's where we have to really be careful with the terminology of cultural factors. The European Union had been wanting Turkey to be a part of it, and their underlying factor was that what does this mean? How far do we stretch? The European Union is already stretched out anyways, but what does that mean? Where Greece is an Orthodox Catholic or Orthodox Christianity, you have Turkey, who's a secular state with majority Muslim population, and that's challenging. These are deep questions we have to ask. The cultural alignment to me is much deeper in a root of Western ideas, and I think Turkey has a right to be there, but there are other mitigating factors that are non-cultural that bother me, with the idea that Turkey is not ready to be a part of the European Union, much of that having to do with the Union itself. So be careful with the cultural factors. It makes me uneasy to try to consider what is cultural versus what could be outright bigotry and racist. And that's where you see that growth of right-wing radicalism in the European Union nations. So be careful with that. I say that with do be careful. That's all I have to say. Cultural factors, not being any of them, for me, language is definitely not a barrier. Religion is somehow an issue, but ultimately we have a convergence of ideas and a convergence of systems and things going into place that are globalization that will eventually erode any of these other factors that seem apparent, because that's just, you're not seeing beyond what these two differences are. There are many other reasons that in culture do affect how we see right from wrong, how we want to do the rules of the road, how business is conducted, how our political systems are connecting. Those are the factors we should be focusing on. And language and religion shouldn't be that much, my opinion. Different levels of union. We have regional cooperations and free trade areas. These are how we determine trade amongst each other. And then customs unions and common markets determine how we trade amongst each other and outside. A full common market means the free movement of services, goods, and people and capital. A political union is a larger step where a system of electoral democracy forms, as you see with the Parliament and the European Commission. So that's what we see as political union, and that's where the European Union is today. Regional cooperation is the most basic level. Why is it sometimes challenging? It really boils down to values, and the nitty-gritty of certain things. Like, for example, the European Union wanted to have a free trade agreement with the United States, but the way we treat animals differently than theirs. We don't believe in we use antibiotics. They don't like that. We don't believe in they believe in hormones or another drugs that we don't accept. So the vice versa. We have different systems in place that really, at the core, if you ever really want to know, in a free trade agreement, agriculture is one of the most contentious issues, and particularly amongst livestock and live animals. So Also, another nail-biting factor is the European Union doesn't accept GMOs. In the United States, we do. Regardless of your issues on that, GMOs have been around for a long time and are a major factor in lifting us many populations out of poverty, as well as limiting starvation across the world for many decades. So that could go on that all day. Happy to. Free trade areas eliminate customs duties, and members are on customs duties. Means like now these imports cannot have there's no tariffs, but there's also no like sometimes we put a special fee on certain products that are not just tariffs. It's just because it's that type of product that gets removed, and that's challenging. Like say for example, the United States has a 85% requirement for sugar. Once again, agriculture. We want our sugar to be domestic, not imported. So that makes it challenging for countries like Brazil, who can export a lot of sugar, won't be able to have a market in the United States, so we protect our farmers. So you have to remove those protections. The next stage, of course, the customs union, is where you see a lot of the European nations that are not really European Union, Switzerland, Liechtenstein, I think Iceland. There's an EEA agreement, the European Economic Agreement. This is where that would land. These are not a part of the Union. They're part of an economic agreement where there's a consensus. France and Monaco are separate countries that are kind of one of the same. They have to follow the European Union because of what France is a part of, but they have this sovereignty that makes Monaco separate and special. Really weird. But it's pretty cool. Can go all day on that one as well. The common market is where all restrictions are eliminated. You cannot have tariffs. You cannot have duties on particular goods. The types of taxes start to harmonize. The flow of goods, services, and labor and capital start to become one. That is a super contentious issue when you're dealing with immigration patterns. And I'll go that when I talk about the European Union. And of course, political union is the full union into existence as we see within the European Union. So something unique. Global markets and multinational groups need to take a look at these different systems because different systems have different rules and different treaties apply in different ways. Also, for example, the United States cannot negotiate with Germany about trade, has to negotiate with the European Union with trade. If I have a domestic situation within two member states of the European Union, the rules within the Union apply, but if I have a situation where it's the United States is involved and a participant in the member state of the European Union is involved, potentially a different treaty might apply. So always be careful of that. We'll talk about the political legal frameworks later next week. You'll find that fascinating, and hopefully give you a better playing field of what's happening and how to navigate as a business person in different countries. This is just an introduction to that. Our next section, we'll talk about the European Union.